this is something we can change. Both of these, smoking and diet, 30%. Hereditary. There is a hereditary factor to cancers, to some cancers, and in my family, my grandparents, my parents, all of my uncles, I've got 2 cousins now that have died. Every single one of them's died of cancer. Every aunt, every uncle. So I have a hereditary part to it, and part of it may be, as I mentioned earlier, my absorption of selenium is not good. So I tested my 2 brothers and my sister for their selenium levels. They were all bad. So maybe part of this hereditary issue in our family is we do not absorb selenium very well, and we have low levels, and we don't have an immune system that fights off the cancers all that well. So I boosted my selenium levels, and my other brother did the same. My youngest brother didn't believe in any of this. Today he's dying of cancer. So it's just sad, but he's the youngest. Anyways, infections are about 5%. Workplace exposure, which we talked about potential nickel or other chemicals. Alcohol, obesity, UV exposure, that'd be your skin cancers. Drugs and pollution and so forth. So the big ones on the left-hand side, the top 2 is smoking and dietary habits. So I'm going to be talking about dietary habits, something we can do something about. This is, it says spinach on it. It's not spinach, this is asparagus. This is asparagus in a can, and a fresh asparagus in the back. And you see on the fresh asparagus in the back, it's got twice the level of zinc, boron, twice the level of copper, and almost 3 times the level of strontium in the fresh versus what's in a can. So there's a lot to be said for fresh fruits and vegetables when you have the opportunity to get them. The can is, in a lot of cases, a poor substitute. Now, literature on our diet of foods and cancer reduction by foods. In this literature survey, 59 out of 74 that studied vegetables, 80% showed cancer reduction by eating more vegetables. 64% by eating more fruits. 87%, I talked about that fresh asparagus versus what's in a can. 87% decrease in cancers if you're having raw vegetables. The alum family it'd be your onions and your garlic, 77% reduction. Green vegetables, 77%. Carrots, 81%. Tomatoes, 71%. And citrus fruit, 66%. So there is a lot of literature behind preventing cancers. We want to prevent them. Once you have a cancer, you're in a different ballpark, different battle, but you want to prevent them as much as you can, and diet can help. Now, what's special about these fruits and vegetables are these phytochemicals. These are chemicals that are made by the plant, are made by the tomatoes, or made by the carrots to fight off infection, basically damage by microorganisms or insects, to fight the insects. They all have it. Just like we have an immune system to fight off disease, they have their system to fight off it. And these chemicals have been shown to fight cancers. So this is why you want to take in as many of these chemicals as you can. Plants cannot flee their attackers, so they produce chemicals to repel the insects, antifungal, antibacterial. Now, key foods with phytochemicals, turmeric, I talked about that one. The chemical that's in it, curcumin, is on the right-hand side, blueberries, strawberries, soya. So they've identified the chemicals that are responsible, in a lot of cases, for reducing the cancers. The one I like is in grapes and wine, red wine, resveratrol. So I'm encouraged to drink red wine, but to get enough resveratrol in my system, I'd have to drink about 15 bottles a day, which would destroy my liver. So you can buy resveratrol tablets at the store. But these are all important things to fight different cancers, or prevent cancers. Now, tomatoes are well known to prevent prostate cancer. Prostate cancer is in places where you have heavy tomato diets, like Italy, is much, much lower than North America. Cabbage and broccoli, bladder and breast cancer. Garlic and onion, lung and stomach cancer. Turmeric, colon, this is what's in your curries, colon, lung, bladder, prostate. We saw how all these cancers in India are much lower than North America. I had to put chocolate in here for the ladies. Chocolate is good for lung cancers and blood pressure. The one thing to worry about chocolate, and you probably want to limit your amounts of chocolate, is most of the chocolate that's been tested has cadmium in it, so we don't want to have too much cadmium in our system.
Why does it have the cadmium?
A lot of it is just soil it's grown in. You know, the plants do absorb what's in the soil, and you know, it's just like the tea.
It's not the processing; it's the actual.
I don't think it's processing, because you know, we've tested chocolate from a lot of different areas, and most of them have got cadmium. Just like right now, there's a problem with certain rice. Rice from certain parts of the world is high in arsenic. So Health Canada is watching that one very carefully.
They were even feeding chickens around Utah, and they found high levels of arsenic in it.
It depends where it comes from. Like, you know, there's places in Quebec where, you know, the arsenic is through the roof, but that's just in the soil, and you sort of have to live with it. You don't want to live in those places. But anyways, green tea is good for leukemia, skin, prostate, and lung. So green tea has got quite a few things. Soya, there's been a lot of studies with soya, and soya flour is the best. And there has to be a minimum amount of soya you're taking into your diet. It's menopausal women will have very few hot flashes if you're taking soya. Good again for breast cancer and prostate cancer. Citrus fruits, stomach, larynx, mouth cancers, and red wine, breast, colon, esophageal cancers. Now we'll go through a few of these at this point. Why is garlic and onions prevent cancers? Well, they prevent the formation of nitrosamines that are formed after eating certain foods with nitrates, the cured meats. The other thing is nitrosamines are also formed from combustion, from smoking. So if you're a heavy smoker, you should be eating lots of garlic and onions. By the way, garlic is far superior to onions. They both are good, but garlic is better. Green tea. Somebody was asking me about green tea. Well, all teas are very rich in those rare earth elements I was talking about. But green tea has a very high polyphenols. They're much higher than black tea. And polyphenols in black tea have been oxidized, so you lose anti-cancer activities. But green tea is very, very good for you. But to optimize your polyphenols you're taking in tea, you should brew the tea over a longer period of time, not just a couple of minutes. You let it steep for at least 5 minutes. You get everything out of the tea. Turmeric basically is present in over 200 medicinal plants. Turmeric is a 30% component of curry, and in lab animals, curcumin, which is the active ingredient in turmeric, show usefulness in stomach, intestinal, colon, skin, and liver cancers. Seems to cut off the blood supplies to the tumors, and that's one way. I know chemotherapy is they try to cut off the blood supplies to these new fast-growing tumors. They need this blood supply, and turmeric seems to have that effect in lab animal studies. Soya, isoflavones, basically the phytochemicals in soya, these resemble estrogens. So basically Phytochemicals are responsible for reducing hormone levels that cause the breast cancer and prostate cancers. The phytochemicals are present in soya flour, a much higher concentration in soya milk. Some of the research, they've done research in California, and they didn't see any difference in soya with respect to breast cancer, but they were not taking very much soya. It seems like you need a certain threshold, a certain amount, where you start to see statistically differences in these studies. In menopausal women, hot flashes are reduced from 80 to 20% if you have soya in your diet. Yes.
Were they using GMO soy?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I haven't gone through details on the studies. I usually read the headlines and read the abstracts. And if there's something really controversial, then I'll read the whole paper. Now there's another family here, the cabbage, the broccoli, the Brussels sprouts, and so forth. And they have compounds in there that basically release anti-cancer agents in your body. Glucosinates, cyanolates are not cancer-fighting, but they do release cancer-fighting chemicals in your body. If you look at that list, the one that's got the highest level, if you want to have this as part of your diet, is Brussels sprouts. We don't see those a lot, but they are much higher than, say, turnip or cabbage, which we're more used to, or broccoli or cauliflower. Brussels sprouts are at the top of the list, so add those to your diet, I think would be recommended. Chocolate? Well, basically chocolates have the polyphenols you see in the green tea. You'll see a series of polyphenols in chocolate. The dark chocolate, the best. The green tea is also very good. Cacao, which is part of your chocolate, 2 teaspoons of that powder is good, and so is red wine. Milk chocolate at the bottom. But it has an effect on lung cancers. We talked about lung cancers today. And cardiovascular disease. We talked about selenium, how good it was for you. Well, where do I find selenium? Well, you've got apples, no, not much in apples. Milk, not much in milk. Bananas, carrots, tomatoes. Red beans, not much there. Red beans have a lot of antioxidants. But then you go to the curry. Curry's 0.7, so curry's good. A wonder food I see a lot of really good stuff, and it's in the diet of a lot of people. It's in your hummus, it's in a lot of diets, is chickpeas. Chickpeas are excellent in terms of a lot of other nutritional elements. Walnuts, cumin, but what's the highest is Brazil nuts. And Brazil nuts take 18 months to grow in the Amazon. They've tried to cultivate the tree in farms. It doesn't work. The tree is dependent on an orchid that grows in the jungle only, and the orchid attracts insects that pollinate the tree. It's a symbiotic relationship. So it's most, if not all of your Brazil nuts you're getting come from the jungle. So the soil must be very high in selenium. It's the highest of any foods that we've seen. Here's selenium in the hair. The blue is in the hair of a male and a female. Basically, I talked about one is the target area you'd like to be in. The male at this point is at 0.6, and the female is at 0.43. And they took 2 Brazil nuts for a month, two a day for a month. And after months, we tested the hair again. The male is at 1.15. Beautiful place to be. The immune system is going 110%. It's great. And the woman's at 0.74, which is great. Not at the one level, but it's great. And it took a month to get to that level. Now, these Brazil nuts were probably not as high in selenium as what Ramiz has here. He tests his Brazil nuts, and he's got the highest level we've seen of any other Brazil nuts.
So what are his?
Pardon?
What are his rated?
His are probably, instead of 13 parts per million, I think his are probably in the 20s. They're really good. Now, one thing I talked to you about before was the copper and iron. We talked about copper and iron for a lot of different reasons. Now I want to talk to you about copper and iron ratio. I said the perfect. If you reach 100, I checked your hair, it's about 1 to 1. It's beautiful. Reach 90, 1 to 1. And the other thing, when we see these older people look at their hair, we don't see any mercury, we don't see any lead. Somehow it's not in their system. And it allows them to live ripe old age. We start off life with breast milk. And if you look at breast milk, it's 1 to 1 copper to iron, if not a bit more copper than iron. So that's the perfect nutrition as you start off as a baby. However, in North America, you go from breast milk in a lot of cases very quickly to formula. Formula comes from cattle, from the cow, and it's high in iron. So you go from a ratio of 1 to 1 copper to iron to 0.1, 10 times more iron than copper. So that's how we start life. And you know, we look at that list on the right, things we have every day. Pepsi, it's all iron, there's no copper. Baby cereal, baby fruits and vegetables, very little copper. A Big Mac, nothing there. Cornflakes, nothing. Hamburger, beef, very, very little. The only meat that we saw had some semblance of copper was turkey. Turkey seemed to be the best of all the meats we looked at. We looked at pork, we looked at moose, we looked at pizza. You know, there is not much copper. On the left-hand side here, you're looking at things which do have copper. And a lot of them is seafood. You've got your crab meat, your lobster, fish oil. We talked about that Mediterranean diet. Remember that we all live longer? Well, it's got copper and iron, but it's got more copper. Of all the citrus fruit, grapefruit seemed to be the best. And it's almost perfect. So grapefruit should be part of your diet. You go down to basmati rice, which is used extensively in India. It's again very close to 1 to 1 ratio, 0.78. And carrots, and you go down that list. So you sort of, if you want to have your red meat, you want to have your big steak, make sure you have the seafood with it. So have your surf and turf, so you get your copper into your system while you're taking your red meat. Now I'm going to talk to you about some of those two elements I talked to you that are part of the sodium, potassium, lithium family, and that's the cesium and rubidium. These are strong alkali elements. They're very basic. They're more basic than sodium or potassium. They're water soluble, so like salt, it gets washed away from our soil. Much more abundant in the soil 10 miles down than it is on the surface. What was on the surface got washed down to the ocean. So if you look at seawater, you've got your cesium, rubidium, a lot more than you get in the soil because it's been washed down to the ocean. Found in much higher concentrations, these two elements, in volcanic areas. So if I look at volcanic area, Hawaii, volcanic islands, they have 40% less cancer than any other state in the U.S. If I look at Naples, Mount Vesuvius, I've been to Naples, polluted city, but of all the cities in Italy, it's got 40% less cancer because you probably have more cesium, rubidium. There's a theory out there, and maybe our cancer researcher will be able to give us some insight on this, but there's a theory out there that when you have a cancerous cell, the membrane around the cell that holds it all together is more porous. We know that cancer cells have more sodium than normal cells. So sodium is getting through more so than a normal cell. And if sodium gets through, there's a good chance rubidium and cesium will also get through, and they go into the cell and they kill the cells. They're so basic they will kill the cell. So this is the theory. We know that people who live in volcanic areas around the world are called blue zones. Blue zones because they live much longer than expected. They don't have great health care like we have here. They can't go into hospitals on a mountainside somewhere, but they live longer than most of us. And it's a good chance because you've got a lot of cesium, rubidium in the soil. One of the foods that is high in cesium, rubidium are mushrooms. So mushrooms seem to suck it from the soil, whatever's there, and concentrate it. We know that if you have a nuclear blow-up, Chernobyl happened in Ukraine. Finland, which is not too far away, harvested mushrooms in the forest because the mushrooms concentrated the radioactive cesium. Cesium is not radioactive, but in nuclear explosion, you get radioactive cesium, you get other radioactive elements, and they're able to measure them in the mushrooms. So mushrooms are very special. So it's something that we talked about your system becoming acidic. You want to make it more basic, get back to stop to use your bones. Mushrooms are highly recommended. And I'm not talking about little button mushrooms. Those are grown in horse manure on tin pans. You want the mushrooms, the longer growing ones, shiitake, the bigger mushrooms. The mushroom we've seen with the highest level of cesium and rubidium is this chaga. And I'm going to talk a minute about chaga. Basically, all mushrooms have high alkali metals. In most mushrooms, like chaga, shiitake, the reishi mushroom is an interesting one because it's high in silver. So it's given as an antibiotic to people. You know, if you're homeopathic medicine, a reishi mushroom is good as an antibiotic because of the silver. It's high in silver. But the chaga grows not in 3 months, it'll grow in 15 years. When it's harvested, you're probably looking at 15 years. It's been sucking the tree. It grows on a birch tree. So it's been sucking everything out of this birch tree for 15 years. All the good elements out of the tree. And like a lot of plants, a lot of elements that are protected from insects and so forth. So it's been doing this for 15 years. So when you get a chaga, it's old. It has a lot of alkali metals. Now I happened to buy some birch syrup recently. We've all heard of maple syrup. You know, that's the Canadian thing. But at the same time the sap runs on a maple tree, it runs on a birch tree. So some people tap the birch tree and get sap. And they concentrate the sap the same as they would maple syrup. And maple syrup is about 40, to get nice thick syrup, it's about 40 to 60 times concentrated. They take the water out of it. In birch, I'm guessing maybe 20 to 30, it's not quite as thick. So we analyzed, okay, this chaga is living on this tree, what's it sucking out of the tree? Well, if you're looking at the birch syrup, 6,000 parts per million potassium, and 6 parts per million rubidium, which a lot of potassium. Remember, this is concentrated 20 to 30.